Hello everyone, my name is Andy and welcome to Firefly Tiny Homes. Today I wanted to make a video to address one of the most common questions we get as we engage with our clients about potential builds and our designs and all that sort of thing. It's actually one of the most requested features we get when talking to clients about building a tiny home is, can I have a gable roof? Have you ever wondered? Maybe you do. Why are so many tiny homes, why are our primary designs focused around a shed roof, which is only one angle, versus a gable roof, which is a more traditional house sort of style or shape? And so I thought I would film a video to address why we typically go with a shed roof style, why we think it provides a better value, and if it can be solved. Is it possible to do a gable roof in a tiny house? So the first thing I want to do is explain how a normal roof structure, and hopefully these will translate to a full house for you, but in a normal house, the way that we build a normal house with a gable roof, our main house is a very simple rectangle with a gable roof. And so this is how it happens. You have a floor structure. Let this 1x4 represent the decking, the floor. And then we attach the walls, which are typically, studs with a bottom plate and top plate. We attach that to the floor. So I've gone ahead and just attached the floor to the walls here with just a couple finished nails. No big whoop. It's just a representation, all right? And then what we do is either with trusses, which come all as one, but the trusses get fastened with a bottom cord right to the top of the walls, or just for argument's sake, let's say we're hand cutting rafters. So in that case, we would put some sort of ceiling joist on. Let this 1x4 sort of represent a ceiling joist. Now we would attach it, for this demonstration, I don't think I necessarily need to. And then we would hand cut rafters, which would get then anchored to both the top plates and to the ceiling rafters. And to kind of symbolize that, I just put a couple little stickers here to kind of keep my rafters, which I have cut at an angle and just sort of attached to represent, them being attached together. And those would get attached usually to a ridge board. So let's say this, the ridge board would be in there, but for simplicity's sake, I left it out of this particular demonstration. So this tape is just sort of representing a connection at the ridge, and then these little stickers are sort of representing a connection at the top of the wall. And because that there's a lot of pressure on, especially on a house, these rafters can be quite big. You could have snow load, you have all the roof and everything that's going on. There's pressure that is bearing down on the roof. And that pressure, you can imagine, wants to go out. But the walls are kept from spreading by the ceiling joist, the ceiling connection here that goes from outside wall to outside wall. And that can be done in a number of different ways. Again, it can be done with the trusses, or this is how it works with a hand-cut roof. Now, you say, you've been in houses, you've seen tiny houses that don't have ceiling joists and have just a big vaulted ceiling. Now, you can accomplish that with pre-engineered trusses that have, so they're called scissor trusses that bring and come up at a slightly less angle and give you a sense of a vaulted that vaulted roof sense. Or you can go ahead and get rid of the ceiling joists altogether, in which case I want to show you what happens if you just go ahead and put ceiling hand-cut rafters right on top of the walls here. All right, this is the way I see a lot of tiny houses being built. I've seen it. Gina and I watch a ton of, because I never know where a good idea is going to come from. So I watch a lot of tiny house videos on YouTube because I think there's always something to learn, some way to be inspired. But I see this a lot, and it is, to me, somewhat tragic because while the roof structure on a tiny house is not large, so it doesn't end up having a ton of weight, and you might be able to go ahead and build your tiny house this way. Oftentimes there'll be a ridge board, maybe a single or even a double 2x6, but think about how long tiny houses are. Those 2x6s aren't really able to carry any weight. So what happens is eventually that tiny house might be subject to snow load, or maybe not snow load, but just time and wind. Wind can exert a lot of pressure on a roof if it comes at the right sort of angle. And what happens, watch this, a small amount of weight and the walls want to spread or bow, and the strength of the roof disappears and it can collapse. I've seen this happen. I've watched people build sheds this way, and eventually they get up there on the roof and start, while it may hold its own weight, as soon as they start putting shingles or roof sheathing and stuff like that, it's too much and it falls in. So not great, because this is a way a lot of, and in fact, some big builders, I contact me if you want to know. I hate to mention names on here, but I have seen some YouTube videos from some decent sized builders in the industry, and I can see that they are doing it this way. Now, are there any right ways to do it? There are. So I'll walk through the right way to build a hand cut, vaulted ceiling, raftered roof. And then, and we'll talk about what that entails. And then I'll get into showing you why a shed roof is an option that might, be more value oriented in some ways. So there are basically a couple of ways that you can go ahead and do this in a way that doesn't compromise strength and structure and durability over time. The main way that you see it done in homes, if it's a hand raftered roof that has a completely open, no ceiling joist, this is the way my screened-in porch is done. And what you have to do is, to make up for the walls not being tied in this horizontal direction, you have to have something capable of carrying the weight of the roof down to the foundation. And if you can't do it through the walls that the tails of the rafter are on, you have to do it through a ridge beam. So now this obviously is just for representation, but imagine this is a big LVL or a glulam beam or something, depending on how much roof weight it has to carry. It has to then imagine this is the end wall, the end gable. Somehow you have to, if this ridge beam is carrying all the weight of the roof, you have to then have some way of carrying this weight down to the foundation. So on the end walls, the ridge beam carries all the weight to the gable end, and then it has to then be transferred down to the foundation of the house or the trailer of the tiny house or something like that, so that these sidewalls where the tails of the rafters aren't actually carrying the weight. All the weight is I'm pushing down on this hard, and it's all being borne by this by the ridge beam. Imagine this is big enough to actually, and depending on how long this beam is, depends on how big it has to be, because it has to span its own weight, let alone carry all the weight of the roof. And then that's transferred all the way down through some sort of point load system, a beam or a built up, some studs or something like that, some post or something, some column carries all the weight. All right, so that's it. And if you want to have zero intrusions inside the tiny house or inside in my home, I have a screened-in porch. Maybe I'll layer in some footage. there's no interior structure whatsoever. It's all just a big open vaulted rafter, hand cut rafter roof. So that's one way to go. On a tiny house, because they're so much longer than they are wide, a ridge beam that's capable of spanning that 28 feet, 24, 32 feet, like the one behind me, 32 feet long, that's a big beam. My screen-in porch is a big screen-in porch, and I have a double, a double 14-inch LVLs that are spanning only 24 feet in order to get, of course, this screen-in porch is much wider, but still, it has to span under its own weight plus carry all the roof. You get the idea. All right, the other way you can do it is you can break up that span. All right, and so I'm going to take this off. Imagine this is still, let's put this over here real quick. And so let's go back and imagine that you have this on the end, and maybe every 8 feet or 12 feet or something like that inside the tiny house or inside the regular house or whatever, you have a beam that goes across the top. So maybe you think about this like a rustic post and beam house, or you can think of this as maybe in a barn or something like that. This is a chunky beam that goes all the way across from wall to wall, but doesn't, there's an open space that, for 12 feet or 8, or longer or something like that. And then, hold on. And then you have something that can carry the roof load, help share the load down to that beam. And this is sort of what you end up with is a sort of like a truss, like a hand. This is very traditional in a post and beam architecture, where every so often you end up having the roof beam doesn't have to be as beefy because it is only spanning 12 feet or 10 feet or some amount, and you can reduce the size of this ridge beam and help share the load. Now this is the way that I see some tiny houses being built. This helps keep the walls straight and keep them from spreading, and help share the load down through those outside walls instead of all being borne on the end. I see some tiny homes being built like this. We've done it a couple of times in the past, and it is the proper way to go because there's a beam that can spread or span 30 feet or something like that is just gigantic and probably not practical inside of a tiny house. All right, so all that you can imagine adds cost. It adds cost to the tiny house. It adds labor, it adds material, and also you might not want this inside your tiny house. It can look really nice. You can do it and it can look really nice, but you might want a giant open space inside your tiny house. Now, sometimes you can hide this inside like a bathroom wall or a bedroom wall, and you can reduce it that way. That is one way that you can do it. And so, but for the most part, most tiny homes end up with some wide, long, something over 12 feet, 16 feet, some long open space, which is living room and kitchen, and you need to break up that span somehow. The other thing that a gable roof does, because we have height limits in the tiny house industry, unless you want to pay a lot extra to move your tiny house, we can only be 13.5 feet off the pavement. And so that really limits the height of this ridge, which then lowers the height of your available sidewalls. For the most part, on our deck over trailers, if you're using trailers that have wheel wells and drop axles and all that kind of stuff, you might get away with this a little bit more. But we think there's a lot of advantages to these long deck over trailers. You get rid of wheel wells and all that stuff, insulate the floor better. There's a lot of advantages to this. And for us, it limits then the height of the sidewalls to around 8 feet. And so we can't have, that limits the amount of the height of windows that we can do. And so I'm gonna cut right here. I'm gonna change one of these legs out for one that's higher to show you the kind of roof line that we tend to choose and prefer here at Firefly Tiny Homes. Oops, one last thing before I go to the shed roof style, before someone in the comments starts to tear me apart. Another option is to do collar ties. But these have to be on every single rafter, and you can't just put them up here at the top like I see a lot of people doing. They have to be within the middle third, I believe, of the rafter. And so that ends up kind of defeating a little bit the whole open feel of the hand-cut raftered vaulted ceiling in a tiny house. So you can do collar ties. It is it is possible. It has to be on every single rafter. And so, to my eye, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'd rather do the put a ridge beam in. Put a ridge beam in that is capable of going at least 6 to 8 feet or so, and then using a combination of bathroom wall, bedroom wall, and sort of like that barn feel of the big beam with a half post. Okay, I'm back. All I did was get rid of the other wall here and add another representation of an exterior side wall that gets us all the way up to about what was the ridge height with the gable roof. Make sense? Okay, so this is the way that we tend to build, because it's very easy to build 2 outside walls at different heights, and then run your, we use 2x6 rafters and attach those to both outside walls. And it is all of the weight still wants to go straight down, and both walls share the load. So I can put a ton of weight right in the middle of this wall, and it does not want to spread because it just wants to go straight down. And it then also, so not only is this like the easiest, fastest, least labor way, so that also means it's a great value because it creates this big open space inside the tiny house. You can do lots of things, very flexible interior space then is what I'm getting around to, okay? And so we think it's a great, value from that perspective, but then it also gives you this as much, interior volume as possible. Because you can even the pitch doesn't have to be this much depending on, where you're at and what you like the looks of. We use metal roofs, which can be done, successfully down to very low slopes, depending on which, the way that you do it. And there's ways to make sure. We do entire, peel and stick, storm barrier underneath. So low slopes are not a challenge for the way that we build. So you get this big, huge volume inside, and a tall wall that you can put, very tall windows in. You can put double layers of windows in. It's a great use of space, especially when you consider that many of our clients end up putting a porch attached to their house. So watch what happens so we tend to put the entry door side on the tall side. So number one, rain doesn't fall off on the entry door, but also because people like to put porches attached to their tiny homes once they get them in place. And those can be permanent, not permanent. They can be enclosed, they can be not enclosed. But watch what happens if you put a porch roof attached to the tall side of your tiny house. All of a sudden, you have what looks like a gable roof style structure. So we think that there's not a lot of compromise by doing a shed roof on your main tiny living space, and then you have we think it can look just fine. And we think, especially with the back porch and stuff, we think a shed roof is an attractive way to go in and of itself, personally. It's a great value, allows for more space inside, and if you choose to put a porch on to your entry side, you end up with a gable style shape anyways. So that's it. It's not like gable roofs aren't possible. They definitely are, and if it's important enough to you, or you're not planning on putting a shed on or a porch on, and you really want that gable roof, it can be done. But it just comes with an added cost of materials and labor. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully this will be a way that I can answer I can point this to people in the future who ask this question quite a bit. And hopefully it's makes sense and is reasonable to you. All right, thanks for tuning in. I hope, let me know if this was helpful, or if you disagree, or you just have a bone to pick with me. That's fine too. We'll get back to filming videos of the next build. It's going to be a 10-foot wide. It's going to be the prairie model, and that'll be exciting too. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.